It's my pleasure and honor to be here today and to co-moderate this discussion together with Jan Dražan, who is a publisher of the book we will speak about. It's great that you have come in such a large number. We will have a series of events which are going to be dedicated to Israel and speakers from Israel. Next week, Dan Shiftan will be here, so he will refresh you with his strategic views about the Middle East. And then the week after, we will have Natan Sharansky. So we are using the opportunity that it's possible to fly between Israel and the rest of the world and between Israel and Prague. And we are grateful for so many visitors. As you all know, today it is about a book and Czech version of a book being published, also being announced at the book fair, which is here in Prague in the next few days. And it's a book called Yoni's Last Battle. And it's my honor to have here Iddo Netanyahu, brother of Yoni, and of course brother of Bibi, but we will not speak that much about Bibi, I promise. I learned today, I didn't read the book, so that's why we have also Honza Dražan here, because he did read the book, probably many times during editing, so he will have some questions regarding the book itself. But I read today for the first time that all of the three brothers you were in Sayeret Matkal, in the elite IDF unit, I have counted that you are then the fourth member of this unit here already speaking at this university. And there were also two commanders of the unit speaking. Who that may have been before you speaking here? You were not a commander, but there were two commanders. They were not your commanders in your time, perhaps.
I don't know. There were so many commanders that I cannot guess.
You can guess.
There was Ehud Barak.
Of course, so he was one of them, yes.
Whatever he said, you have to ignore. Okay.
Yes. So Ehud Barak was here.
He was actually my commander when I was, most of the time when I was serving. And this other one, I don't know. I don't know who else can speak English of them. I have no idea.
Well, one was younger, so he was there later in the 90s as a commander. Doron Avital.
Doron Avital is a Czech wife.
He's a Czech wife. That was one of the reasons why he has been here. Yes, and the third one was, but I think he was not a commander. It was Gabi Ashkenazi. He was here recently, but he was a member of. He was a member. I checked it before, so I was not sure, but it says that he was a member for some time. Besides being from Sayeret Matkal, you have been a medical doctor and a writer, and I can see that even a prolific writer of books and theater plays. So thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Let's talk about the book. Why did you write the book?
Why did I write the book? Do you want the long answer or the short answer?
For about 3 minutes.
First of all, why did I research the raid? And I did that because things were said, actually as fantastic as it may sound, and it's actually almost unbelievable, none, except for one person, and I'm not exaggerating, none of the members of the unit who participated in the raid were ever interrogated. Whether after the raid or even many years after the raid. Can you all hear me? Is this, yes, okay. They were interrogated, just one person. And so, because of that fact, there were a lot of erroneous information, fabrications, you can say, that came out about the raid and about Yoni's role. That was especially intense around 10 years after the operation. And so, my father started with this, but I decided to start interviewing the members of the unit who took part in the raid and to have them talk on tape and tell us what happened there. And so I went from one to another, long interviews, tape recorded, and and just to document, so that these facts will be documented for history. And with these interviews, I discovered that there were many things I did not know. And the events were much more fantastic than what I had known until then. For several reasons, which whoever reads this book will find out. And so at a certain point in time, I said to myself, this has to be written down, okay? It cannot just be left as some documentary evidence somewhere. And that's why I wrote the book. I wanted to relay the story of the raid. I thought it was important also for the history of Israel. And also to document the true events regarding Yoni's last week of life, to do that. And that was important to me, of course, as a brother, and to document his role in the operation and his death, and what happened prior to the operation, the preparations, and during the operation. That's it. It's a simple goal in order to preserve these things for history.
Yeah, it's 50th years anniversary now. And when did you start? How long did it take to?
The research itself probably lasted around 3 years. Writing the book, I don't really remember how long it took. Maybe a year. I can't tell you. I don't remember. But that's more or less. And 15 years after the raid, 5 years after I started researching the raid, that's when the book came out.
Because it's very precise description of the preparation of this operation and also operation itself. So it must be really difficult to speak with so many people.
No, it's actually, look, my father was a historian of the Middle Ages, okay? And that's very, very hard because you have documents.
Not so many witnesses.
No live witnesses. You have documents, you have to read them, you have to analyze them. It's not so easy it's very difficult to arrive at the truth as a historian. But in this particular case, except for Yoni, everybody came back alive. And except for one, they all tried to relay the truth, the events as they happened, truthfully. Sometimes they were wrong, their memory didn't serve them well. Sometimes they misunderstood some things, but overall, arriving at the truth was very, very easy. It was not difficult at all. And you put the facts together. The question is how to relay it in a fashion that can be understood by everybody. I myself do not like reading military history. And and my wife certainly does not, most women I think don't like it. But this particular book, I think reads, everybody can understand exactly the course of events. And you say that it goes from one to another, that's true, but it's very condensed because one of the amazing things is the preparations of this operation, as opposed to what you might hear or see in movies, documentaries, other books. The actual operation was prepared in a day and a half, that's all. If I can just briefly go back to what happened there in June of on Sunday of the week, the plane was hijacked, the Air France plane was hijacked from, it took off from Tel Aviv, but it had a landing in Athens, and when it took off from Athens to Paris, it was hijacked by Palestinian and German terrorists. And that was on Sunday. It was then eventually flown to and landed in Entebbe, Uganda, which is right at on the equator, where, as it turned out, Idi Amin, the dictator of Uganda, the president, was cooperating with them. The whole thing was planned ahead of time. So they were supported by the Ugandan army. That was Sunday. They demanded the release of something like 55 terrorists in exchange for the lives of the hostages. And on Thursday noon, the Israeli government decided that they had no option, they had no choice, and they decided that they will accede to the demands of the terrorists and to start negotiating with them. And they sent one of the aides to the prime minister to Paris that morning to join the negotiations with the terrorists. And Rabin says in his memoirs, and he said that all along, that this was not a ploy. This was done sincerely, that they intended indeed to go through with the agreement. But what happened, and because he saw no other way, what happened, things changed on Thursday, that very day. Because until that time, there was no real information about what was going on in Entebbe. We knew that the hostages were somewhere in this vast building called the Old Terminal that was not used, it was abandoned. We didn't know where in the Old Terminal. We had no knowledge. We didn't know how many terrorists there were there. We also did not know whether the Ugandan army was cooperating with the terrorists or not. And because when you don't have intelligence, you cannot plan an operation. It's impossible. So all those who say that they would planned it during the week and all that, they had ideas maybe, but there was no plan. The idea that there might be actually the possibility of an operation arose Thursday once the terrorists released most of the hostages. The non-Israeli hostages were released, most of them were released to Paris. And for the first time, we could get information on what was going on in Entebbe. And so Thursday morning, an officer of the Israeli army who knew about special operations was also flown to Paris. And Thursday, late afternoon, evening, he started interrogating the released hostages and started sending back information to Israel. And so for the first time, Thursday evening, there was the beginning. We started getting information. We knew we'd get more that allowed the creation of a plan. And so the whole thing was, the planning started Thursday at 10 p.m. and the planes took off Saturday noon from Israel. The whole thing was prepared in a day and a half, that's all. So that is, I forget the question that you asked, but in any case, so this is one of the more, I would say, amazing things about this operation that's almost unheard of, how quickly and how condensed everything was done, yet nevertheless it succeeded.
I think that it's also interesting and quite extraordinary thing that when the planes started from Israel to Uganda, so at that time they didn't have final permission from government.
That's true. Yeah, no, the government convened. I mean, the defense minister and the prime minister knew that there was a plan, beginning plan, and on Friday night there was also a model exercise next to the unit base in which the chief of staff saw it and was impressed that this maybe will succeed. And so he told the officers that he is going to recommend the operation to the government. And Rabin, I think, saw the plan sometime at the night, early Friday morning maybe, the initial plan. The plan actually was I'm talking about the unit's plan, this special unit, not the overall operation. This plan was composed during Thursday night. As the plan was being done, more information came in. The unit, Yoni's unit, was directly in contact with that officer who was in Paris. And so by Friday morning, he was able to finalize more or less the plan. And then they started rehearsing within a few hours, rehearsing the operation. They did many preparations during Thursday night. And Rabin, it was presented to him, and he thought, okay, this maybe will work. And the defense minister at that time was Shimon Peres. And he asked on Friday, he asked to speak directly to Yoni, to the lieutenant colonel in charge of the unit, the commander of the unit. So Yoni went to his office in the military headquarters in Tel Aviv. And what I discovered after I wrote the book, and this is what Moshe Dayan, the famous general, relates in one of his interviews. He says, Peres came to me on Friday and wanted my opinion about the idea of the raid. And I told Peres that if the head of the Air Force tells you that he can bring the planes to Entebbe, and if Yoni tells you that he can reach the old terminal in Surprise, then I would go for it. I think you should support this idea. So I guess he wanted to know from Yoni what he thought. It was a one-on-one meeting. I've never heard of such a thing between the defense minister and a lieutenant colonel. And they sat for about half an hour. Yoni explained to him why he thought this operation will succeed, while there will be why he thought very few hostages will be killed. And Peres says that it definitely influenced him. But the government was not yet convened. I think Peres knew about it, Rabin knew about it from the government, nobody else. But they were all called to session Saturday. Saturday around noon, when the planes were taking off from Tel Aviv. At that time, we held the southern tip of Sinai was still in our hands. Sharm el-Sheikh, there was an airport there. So they flew to Sharm el-Sheikh, and all this time the government was convening.
And it was the full government, or has bin Bachon, this security cabinet?
The full government. The full government on Saturday. And the discussion lasted many hours. The chief of staff was there. He told them this could also all go wrong. All these, our military forces that we sent, I think altogether 180, I'm not sure. From the unit, there were altogether 60. The initial force was 30. They could all die. And the planes, and nobody could, maybe the hostages could all die, the planes could all be destroyed. We don't know. I think it'll succeed. And so this started the discussion that lasted for hours. At a certain point in time, they were waiting a few hours in Sharm el-Sheikh in the Sinai Desert, and they said, okay, if we want to get there to Entebbe at midnight, which was the optimal hour, Saturday at midnight, we have to take off. So they were given the okay to take off and to start flying, and if the government decides not to approve, they would just turn around and come back. But the government approved it. Very courageous decision on the part of the government. And they got the signal on the plane that they got the go-ahead, and they continued. This is all described in the book, much better than what I'm doing now, okay?
So how many interviews did you do, or how many people did you speak to?
It's written here in my foreword, I think around 70.
So how many of them did you know before? Because you ended in 1973, and then this was 76.
I knew many of them. Some of them were, I had actually commanded for a few months when they were undergoing with my wife. She was teaching them something. So I knew many of them. And I also had done reserves in the unit. I happened to meet those I didn't know. I knew a lot of them. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And that's one of the reasons they were willing to speak to me. Because you serve in that unit at that time was totally secret. The name was even secret. Nobody knew the name, Seret Matkal. It was hush-hush. And so they were not interviewed about the raid by the army. That's the army's business. But to anybody who was outside the army, we won't speak about it. Because they had this code of secrecy. But to me, they were willing to speak.
So you had to persuade?
No persuasion. The only one who refused to speak to me was Ehud Barak, for some reason. But because he actually was involved in the planning. He actually spent some time, maybe an hour or so, in the middle of Thursday night with Yoni on the plan for various reasons, which you can read in the book. But they all spoke to me willingly, and a few times. For instance, the chief intelligence officer, I think I spoke to him 5 times on tape.
What was the most surprising from the interviews you learned? What was the most striking, something new?
Yeah. I would say 2 things. One I discovered before these interviews, and that was striking. But one that I discovered during the interviews is that when the chief of staff saw the model exercise and told some officers there that he's going to recommend to the government, it was around midnight, after maybe 1 o'clock at night. And the word spread in the unit that nobody, I don't know of anybody that I interviewed for this book who said that when he heard about the raid, some of them first time Friday morning, he thought this would actually occur. And none of them believe that this raid will happen. They will train for it for a day, and the government will never approve it. The chief of staff will not approve it, the government. It's too risky. All of a sudden they find out around 1 or 2 a.m. Friday night that the chief of staff says he's going to recommend it. So the first time they thought, hold on a second, there's actually a chance that this operation will be approved by the government.
Who was the chief of staff?
Mota Gur. And so there were 4 officers, 3 or 4, who I would say they were in conflict with Yoni throughout the year that he was commander. And they decided that the unit was not prepared for this operation, that it will end in catastrophe. Now, they were used to very long-term planning for an operation that's far away, okay? An operation that in the unit sometimes we would train not weeks, months for a single operation, and you know every step, every moment what you do. Here, they found out Friday morning, some of them, that there's going to be this operation. They did some training. They received a briefing from Yoni of the plan. That night, they already did the model exercise, and the following morning, they have to go to Entebbe. They thought it would end in catastrophe. And so they decided to send one of them, who was the son of one of the ministers in Rabin's government. He himself, the father, had been a chief of staff in Israel, to go home, to wake up his father, and to, if he doesn't know about the idea of the operation, to tell him about it, and to tell him this is crazy. This is, the real situation is this is catastrophe, and you should prevent the government from approving it. Tell Rabin, talk to Rabin, tell him not to do this crazy thing. And so he sneaked. Nobody was allowed to leave the unit. He only gave instructions not for nobody to leave the unit because of security reasons. He sneaked out of the unit and took a car. And on the way home, he changed his mind, okay? And he turned around. He never explained to me why he changed his mind. I can only guess. But, and then he went back to sleep. And the operation, that was a thing that surprised me very much. The deputy commander of the unit, Yiftach Reicher, told me, his explanation says, look, this is the scariest operation that I know of, because we could have all have died there. And he's a very brave soldier, fought in the Yom Kippur War. He was also very brave in Entebbe. That very much surprised me. What also surprised me, what I learned, is what happened in the operation itself, which was very much different from what I knew or what was told to me that happened. And that, I would say, was more shocking. I would say the critical minute, the time of the assault, what happened there was to me an event that was, I speak about it fairly dryly here because I'm telling a story. I'm not flowing here with emotions. I don't want it to be that way, but that certainly is an event that you can read about that was, I would say, surprising. To use a word that does not really describe what I felt.
And so you collected the interviews, put it together into the book. What about the Israeli censorship?
It went through censorship. Hardly anything was not a problem.
That was not interesting and shocking that everything was.
What happened was very interesting. What happened was not described correctly in the military reports. Exact opposite was described. But the censor doesn't know. He's not a historian. He reads it. To him, it sounds, okay, this is what happened. It's not a big secret. Or he didn't think it was a secret. But that raised all hell loose when the book came out. Attacks on me, on you name it. When you tell the truth about something, whoever's an author here, you should know that this is not a very comfortable life afterwards, okay? Nobody's going to compliment you.
So, Jan will ask you questions, but raise your hands because we can take some questions from the audience. Questions, yes?
What made this unit, Sayeret Matkal, so special that it was capable to doing this operation?
That's, as they say, as the professors, that's a very good question, okay? Because the unit did other operations, and what we worked on as soldiers were intelligence operations, secret operations, not combat operations. Here and there was some shooting, but it had nothing really much to do with combat. For some reason, the unit was called upon when this terrorist incident started in Israel. The unit was called upon. There was no anti-terrorist unit at the time in Israel. Did not exist. So they figured, okay, the unit can do this because it was special, okay? We were not very successful. One of the successes was when there was a hijacking of a plane, Sabina airline plane. They landed it in Ben Gurion, and my brother Bibi took part in that. And so we entered and we killed most of the terrorists successfully. Now, why was it successful? They all went with guns. We never trained with guns, pistols. Only afterwards we trained with pistols. It was successful because some members of the unit, when they got discharged, they went to work in El Al. And they were trained by this American guy who taught them how to do the work because they became security men on the airplane. And they were the ones who killed the terrorists, okay? But the unit did it. It became, okay, the unit can do these things. And then there were other terrorist incidents where the unit failed, including Ma'alot, where 35, I think, children got killed. And what made this raid successful? First of all, we trained a little bit more afterwards. By 1976, there was already anti-terrorist training, real training. And secondly, Yoni was also always considered the most able combat commander that the unit ever had. Because it's true, he did not grow up in the unit, he grew up in the paratroopers. He took part in the Six-Day War. He did a lot of things in the Yom Kippur War, and those things that he did as commander were very successful in the Yom Kippur War, amazing things, some of which are related here in this book. And so he was considered the kind of officer that you want him to lead the force by the men of the unit, despite what those 3 or 4 officers, they also knew that he was more capable, but they simply thought that the unit was not prepared. And so I think the success, if you read the book, you can also see the large measure of the success of the raid, of the operation, which hinges on what happens in a few seconds. They were all in about a hall of this size, more or less, 106 hostages, and 4 terrorists holding Kalashnikov rifles and hand grenades can kill half of them within seconds. If they understand that there's a force coming, and if the force is delayed, they can kill almost everybody. So the success hinges on what happens in those few seconds between the time the terrorists understand what's going on and the entry of the soldiers into the hall. And when you read it, you understand how this was accomplished. But after this, other units arose, other anti-terrorist units arose that I would say have far more training than this unit to deal with situations, and indeed they did in the coming years.
The hostage-taking situations, you mean?
Yes.
Because the other types are still part of the core.
That's something else.
Okay, questions? Very good. So take microphone. Microphone will come.
Thank you, Dr. Netanyahu, for coming here and talk to us and telling about the book you wrote. Growing up, I'm Israeli. I'm living now in Prague. Growing up, I grew up on the story of Yoni Netanyahu, told by my parents, regarding like what heroism is and what sacrifice is. My question to you, this is very interesting because it was told to me as a folklore. I never really knew what happened there. And you told before that telling the truth, uncovering the truth, it's not comfortable life after that. And you told about the other authors maybe out there. I'm not an author. Can you expand on why? Why? What drives you? If later it will be uncomfortable and maybe unpleasant, and of course.
You talk about this particular case or in general? Or
In
you
general.
want me to philosophize? Because
If you would be able to combine it, would be amazing.
yeah, that's a difficult question. I'm not sure it's an excellent question, but it's a difficult one. No, when you tell the truth and it conflicts with the story that people hear, when it conflicts with the official report of the Israeli army, and when it is runs against political, I would say, wills that people want to achieve things politically. If it goes against them, that's when all hell breaks loose. And by the time I told this story, of course, the name Netanyahu was known politically. And I would say that this was used as a means of attacking the Netanyahu name, as if the book was written by the family and not by me. It was always the family, the family, the family. The crazy family that wants to glorify their son, the brother, okay? And that occurred for, I would say, dozens of years. And despite the facts of the book, despite the quotes I gave from the soldiers, which nobody said, they never said it, but it doesn't matter. Reporters ignore things, okay? The truth doesn't really matter to them. So this occurred for dozens of years. For a while, I wrote articles to refute the attacks. And then I decided, before that, but it was published 30 years after the raid, I compiled a book of 600 pages or more, basically giving the testimonies of the soldiers at 30 years to the raid. And that's it. You know, nobody ever said that the testimonies that I invented them. And they, actually I was surprised when I compiled the book and I worked on it for several years. I was surprised that I had to change almost nothing in this book, that the initial book was very accurate. But, and that was it. I stopped answering. After 30 years, I said, okay, I did what I did. I have a life. I can't deal with this anymore. Luckily, 40 years after the raid, 10 years ago, the soldiers of the unit themselves, as a reaction, and they write about it in the forward, as a reaction to these falsifications, they finally decided to tell their story. So they wrote a book called Seyeret Matkal Beguf Rishon. I would translate the Seyeret Matkal in first person singular, in which each one tells his memories. And whoever reads their account and whoever has any intelligence understands that their account meshes completely with my account, taking into consideration that after 40 years, memories, of course, fade and change. But yeah, that's it. I don't look. Somebody was interviewing me about the Entebbe raid because of the 50th year in Israel, and I was telling her about what I told you now about the planning of the raid, that it started only Thursday night. And she sends me, I think a week ago, she sends me, yeah, but in Wikipedia, it says that Yoni was given on Thursday a plan that had already been prepared. I said, what can I do? You know, I'm not going to even bother. Wikipedia, anybody can change anything. Okay, so that's Wikipedia for you. They call it encyclopedia, I don't know why. My father was the editor, chief editor of the Hebrew Encyclopedia, and when we want to look up something in Jewish history, of course it's not current, that's a real encyclopedia, not Wikipedia. Yes, yeah.
Another question.
Shalom, Mr. Netanyahu.
Yes.
My name is Ilanit. I also live in Prague, Israeli born.
Too many Israelis here, okay.
You've spoken a lot about the Sayeret Matkal unit and the operation, and Yoni as a lieutenant, but not much about Yoni as a person. And particularly, I would love to hear from you what is important for you to be passed on, especially in Israel, to generations to come. So, you know, about Yoni and the person that he was.
In this book, there are chapters of my recollections of Yoni, small intervening chapters. There's a chapter about Entebbe, and then a small chapter about my memories of him as an older brother, and then as a commander of the unit, because I served under him. He was my commander in the unit. So these are chapters that are interwoven in the book. I think they reveal a lot about him. Also about Entebbe, what I relate to in Entebbe. But what we did after Yoni died, we compiled his letters into a book of letters called Michteve Yoni. It was translated into English, Russian, maybe Czech one day. And this book has had tremendous, still being sold in Israel. If anybody wants to really know about Yoni, that is the book to read, the letters of Yoni. And even nowadays, I hear all the time from soldiers how much they were influenced by reading his letters. It would maybe, I don't think I'm bragging here or being overly exaggerating, not bragging, exaggerating, when I say that to some extent, the tremendous courage, a tremendous understanding of the role of these young people in Israel has something to do with the influence that Yoni had through his letters on them, because that they say it. They say it openly. I'm talking about all the young people that on October 7, when the army was not organized, was not doing anything in the first few hours, they just took a weapon from home, and they, if they were on vacation or something, and they took a car, or they hitchhiked, and they went to fight against the terrorists in the Gaza area, in the villages, and many of them paid with their lives. It's a kind of spirit that I'm not sure existed in my time. Maybe it existed when the state was founded. To this extent, I don't think it existed. I think I was surprised to see all of this happening. It's hard to say to what extent there is an influence here or not. I cannot tell you. But Yoni's personality, I think, comes through very clearly in his book of letters.
So you were 24 when he got shot?
What do you say?
You were 24, right?
Yes,
And he was?
30.
30. Yeah. Okay, another question.
Good afternoon, sir. My name, sorry. My name is Pavel Kolář, and I'm former Special Operations Forces commander within Czech Armed Forces. And then my question is a little bit connected to another famous author of the book with title Special Operations. The author is Admiral McRaven, who was former U.S. Special Operations commander.
Yes.
He was actually in charge of raid on Osama bin Laden. Anyway, 8 chapters within his book. One of them is Entebbe operation.
That's true.
Have you ever read the book? What do you think?
Sure. No, I was in contact with him. He was desperate to search for information about Entebbe. Everything that, when he was writing the book about special operations, he was researching for information about Entebbe, and he read all the books that were written, and he understood something here is wrong, okay? This does not make sense, what he read. And so he contacted the head of the squadron, the Israeli squadron, Shiki Shani, another interesting person, the Air Force squadron that flew to Entebbe. And he said, where can I get real information? And he told him the only person you can get real information from is from Iddo. And so he contacted me. My book had already been published in Hebrew, but not yet in English, but there was an English translation that was ready. And so he wanted to receive the information from my book, and he wrote me back. He said, this is like a gold mine, okay? And sent me the documents. I disagreed with some of the things that he said or wrote, but I didn't. He wanted to downplay the critical part in the seconds, the critical seconds in the operation. He wanted to downplay it. There was a halt in the assault related to one person. He did it as if the force stopped. I said, that is not something you can do, because that means everybody's to blame for something that could have ended that could have cost the lives of everybody. And he agreed. He agreed. He understood it immediately. But overall, we had exchanges, and I think that what he tells, the story that he tells in the chapter is very accurate. Yeah.
So another question there.
My name is Lars, I'm from Germany. I heard the story about the Entebbe raid from my father as a child. He worked in the German army administration and was important in building the German special forces, Commando Special Forces. And my question is, to which extent do you think the Entebbe raid influenced the thinking in special forces across the world of what is possible, since it's such a unique operation?
I'm really not a military expert, and I didn't follow special operations afterwards. I think the example of Entebbe is something that influenced other nations. The fact that there's a nation that is under assault, that is being blackmailed, basically, and is deciding to take the risk and do what is necessary. And that is an example that I'm afraid was there, or maybe some special operations, but it's not the example that we see in Europe of today. I mean, the Chancellor of Germany blurted out when we attacked Iran in June, the 12-day war, blurted out that Israel is doing the dirty job of Europe. He was right. But why aren't you doing this job? Germany, a huge country with, 80 million people. I don't know how many exactly. Israel, they're threatening you just as much as they are. What do you think? They're going to leave you alone if they have nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles that can reach Berlin? Why aren't you doing something? Why does Israel have to do it all alone? We didn't know that Trump or America would go in with us at that time. But this is the example of Entebbe. So it had maybe an influence, but unfortunately it was short-lived. Yes.
Shalom, Mr. Netanyahu, Toda Rabba for coming today, joining us. My name is Eva Fastova. I'm not an Israeli. I am Czech-born. And my question to you is, the story of Entebbe is not much known in the Czech public, not as much as in Israel, obviously. And as I'm studying security management and international security, my question is there something that we can learn from the operation in Entebbe even today? If it may be for tactics or even just the human side of Yoni's leadership or any of these things?
Yeah,
we can still carry something on.
It's really, I would say, what you can learn from it is leadership. It was done by sheer willpower of the lower echelon officers, such as Yoni and such as other officers, parallel officers in the other units that were in Entebbe. They did not take part in the freeing of the hostages. But they were all for doing this, and they pressured from below, the chief of staff, that they thought it should be done. It's really as a matter of willpower, because I told you about the sort of rebellion of those officers. It was a bad situation. Saturday morning, when everybody got up and everybody learned that it was not canceled during the night, still on. The commander of these officers, whom I also know, served with him, he was then a captain. He had the sense to approach Yoni and tell him, listen, there's a bad feeling among some of the officers about this operation. And so Yoni convened all the officers that went on this operation and had an hour-long session with them of tactics of what to do. Okay, you ask questions, and I'll answer. There's a name for it in English, I forget. It's written, I forget what it's called. And they asked him, and he answered. It was very straightforward, and it succeeded in changing their whole attitude. They all said that when they left that meeting, that hour-long meeting, they felt very good about the raid. And the briefings he gave them before they, in Sharm el-Sheikh, before they entered the plane, they said they'll always remember the rest of their lives the confidence that he instilled into them, not only the importance of the mission, but the confidence that they would succeed. And then in the plane itself, the single plane, initially the one plane landed, the other plane stayed behind. Just a force of 30 men to do the job. And he, as the plane was landing, he went among the men, stood on top of the Land Rover Jeeps, shook their hands, once again reassured them that this will succeed. So what's to be taken from it is not only skill, which you need to have, of course, but also a kind of leadership that imbues people with purpose and imbues them with confidence. I would say that's maybe the number one lesson to be taken from this book.
And you said that there was no interrogation afterwards, like no debriefing.
It was a ridiculous debriefing. It was done in the unit. Yoni was dead. Okay, the person who replaced him immediately had been his competitor the year before. As the deputy commander of the unit, Yiftach Reicher, said, this was the strangest debriefing I've ever been into, and the least, and the worst one. It was a very, it debriefed nothing. He let some people talk. Nothing was written, nothing was recorded, and he summed it up. I have the page with some paragraph, meaningless paragraph. That's it. That's the debriefing that was done. There was afterwards a debriefing done by the chief of staff. The whole, many officers, and only one person from the unit who gave the information of what happened, and that was all wrong. Not all, but a lot of it was wrong. And that was the only person who was then afterwards, a month later, was debriefed by the Military History Division. So only one person gave information. All the other officers, all the other men were never interrogated until I debriefed them.
So in how many languages it has been translated, published?
Well, into Czech.
Yes,
okay.
let's start from the end, okay, Czech.
No, into English, into Russian, Chinese, Italian, Spanish, okay? I mean, those are the major languages. And now it's being translated into Serbian, into German, into Czech, and Croatian, of course. I'm sorry, okay. The person responsible for these latter translations is sitting right here, Philip Gashpa.
All right. So.
And he was the one who contacted Jan and told him about the book. And because he knows him to be a serious publisher, that's what he told me. He assured me that he was a very serious publisher, and it turned out to be the case. And I think also into Albanian, right? Okay. And maybe more to come. There are many languages in the world.
Yeah. So thanks, Philip, for this. Tell me, there are several movies about the Entebbe raid. Did you watch them, or did you like it? Or?
You're talking about fiction?
Yeah.
No, I saw two movies. There were many. There were some TV movies, as they called them at that time, after the raid. I did not see them. I saw only two movies. I saw the first movie that was done by an Israeli director. His name was no, not Globus, the other guy. לא, השותף של גלובוס. גולן, מנחם גולן, yeah. It's a positive movie. Not as I discovered afterwards, it was wrong, okay, because he received wrong information. But it was a movie. I would say it had something to do with, I would say, the memory of Yoni. I would say the kind of semi-mythical figure he has become. That particular movie. I cannot say it's a great work of art. And then I saw a horrible movie a few years ago with this famous director, 7 Days at Entebbe. And the hero of that movie is the German terrorist. He is the hero because he's a great humanitarian. I'm surprised he didn't get an award by Yad Vashem because he was such a great person. It's a ridiculous movie, and of course, I was actually, he had fairly correct information about the operation itself in terms of the unit, because he happened to speak and to two people, the first two who entered the hostage hall and killed the terrorists, Amir Ofer, a guy from Jerusalem, and Amnon Peled, a guy from kibbutz south of Haifa, both of whom I know. And also, I think he spoke also to Amos Goren, who killed the fourth terrorist in the hall, whom I recruited to the unit. So he was fairly accurate in terms of how it actually happened. But otherwise, the movie is, I would say, typical example of the degeneration of Western morals. I cannot describe it in any other way. The terrorist is a good guy, and Peres, or Rabin, I think there is depicted as this guy who gung-ho. I forget the whole thing, but that they should not have done this operation. The big mistake is to actually go and kill these wonderful